In the midst of a deadly blizzard in Timber Falls, Officer Logan Pierce stumbles upon a heartbreaking scene. An abandoned German shepherd, frozen and battered, tied to stakes in the snow. Its body covered in bloodied ice, its eyes pleading for help. The dog seems to have lost all hope. Logan's heart races as he fights against the storm to save this helpless animal, a companion that, despite its wounds, is ready to fight for life. What happens next will leave you in awe of the unbreakable bond between man and dog. Will Logan and this brave dog survive the storm, or will the darkness take over? Watch to find out. The wind howled across the snowy mountain range of Timber Falls, sending sheets of icy snow tumbling through the air. Officer Logan Pierce squinted against the storm as he drove his patrol SUV along the winding road. The weather had turned vicious, a brutal blizzard blanketing the mountains in a thick, suffocating silence, broken only by the occasional crunch of his tires on the packed snow. Logan had seen countless storms in his years on the force, but this one felt different. It wasn't just the ferocity of the wind, it was the strange stillness in the air, the weight of something that felt wrong. As he rounded a bend, a flicker of movement caught his eye. He hit the brakes, slowing his vehicle. At first it seemed like an illusion, but then he saw it clearly. A shape huddled in the distance, barely visible through the swirling snow. Logan stopped, his instincts kicking in. Something about this wasn't right. He grabbed his flashlight, opened the door, and stepped out into the biting cold. His boots sank deep into the snow as he made his way toward the figure. The closer he got, the clearer it became. A dog. A German shepherd. Logan's heart skipped a beat. The animal was tied to 4 iron stakes, its body frozen and covered in bloodied ice. Its fur, once sleek and strong, was matted with frost and blood, and its body was battered, showing signs of brutal abuse. The dog's breathing was shallow, and its eyes, wide glazed with pain, flickered up at him before turning away as though it no longer believed help could come. Logan's hands trembled as he dropped to his knees, the cold sinking through his uniform. He pulled his knife from his belt, cutting through the thick ropes that bound the dog to the stakes. Each rope was tangled and tight, dug into the dog's skin. With each slice, the dog let out a faint whimper, but it was too weak to do more than twitch. Logan worked quickly, heart pounding as he freed the animal from its cruel captivity. The German shepherd collapsed to the ground, too exhausted to move. Logan gently scooped the dog up, cradling it in his arms, feeling its body shake with cold. He wrapped it tightly in the wool emergency blanket from his patrol pack, whispering softly, "You're not dying here, not tonight." The storm raged around them, but Logan knew he couldn't waste any more time. He carried the dog back to his SUV, carefully placing it in the back seat. Logan started the engine, cranking the heater to its highest setting. As he glanced in the rearview mirror, he could see the dog's chest rising and falling weakly, but at least there was a sign of life. Logan's mind raced as he sped down the icy mountain road toward Timber Falls. He had to get the dog to Dr. Claire Jennings, the only veterinarian in town, as soon as possible. He glanced at the dog again. Its fur, though matted and stained, still held that undeniable strength, the same strength that had carried it this far despite the cruel torture it had endured. Logan wasn't sure what kind of hell this animal had gone through, but he knew he couldn't leave it to die. Not on his watch. He barely noticed the headlights of another vehicle approaching, its presence unexpected in such a storm. As it passed, the driver's eyes locked with Logan's, a cold, knowing stare that sent a chill down his spine. Logan didn't give it a second thought. His only focus was on getting the dog the help it needed. The mystery of the driver's strange gaze would have to wait. For now, Logan had a dog to save, and the road ahead was full of uncertainty. Logan's patrol SUV screeched to a halt outside Timber Falls' small veterinary clinic, the sound of tires grinding against the snow echoing in the still night. He jumped out, not bothering to lock the door, and hurried around to the back seat where Andy lay, still wrapped in the emergency blanket, breathing raggedly. The dog had been through hell, and it was far from over. Dr. Claire Jennings, tall and sharp-eyed, opened the door at the sound of his frantic knocking. She barely blinked as Logan carried the dog inside. "What happened?" Claire asked, her voice calm but urgent, as she quickly guided Logan into the back of the clinic. Found him tied up in the snowstorm, Logan said, barely catching his breath. I don't know who did this, but he's badly hurt. Claire nodded her hands, moving quickly and efficiently as she set up a table and began assessing Andy's condition. She unwrapped the blanket gently, her eyes narrowing at the sight of the deep cuts and bruises across the dog's body. Whoever did this, they were trying to break him, she muttered under her breath. These wounds aren't from a regular fight, they're deliberate. The ropes left scars and his body's been beaten hard. Logan stood to the side watching as Claire worked. There was a quiet precision in her movements as she carefully cleaned the wounds, her face set in concentration. She was no stranger to pain or suffering, but this was beyond what she usually saw. Logan's gaze shifted to Andy, whose glassy eyes met his for a fleeting moment. A soft whimper escaped from the dog as Claire adjusted his leg, her fingers brushing against the raw wounds. But there was something else, something beyond the pain in the dog's eyes. It was trust, or maybe hope. Logan didn't know which, but it was enough to make him feel like he wasn't alone in this. They were in it together now. Claire worked through the night, checking vitals, stitching wounds, and keeping Andy stable as the storm outside continued to rage. Logan didn't move from his spot by the table, his eyes fixed on the dog. He watched as Claire dripped fluids into Andy's IV line, her quiet hum filling the otherwise silent room. As the hours passed, Logan found himself lost in thought. He thought about his father, how much he'd missed him, how much he'd been taught about duty, loyalty, and protection. But standing there next to a dog that had been through unspeakable pain, Logan realized something. His father's lessons had always been about protecting others. But right now it wasn't just about duty. It was about connection, something deep beyond the uniform, beyond the job. Logan shifted in his seat, leaning forward slightly, eyes still on Andy. The bond between them was already starting to form. A quiet understanding, an unspoken trust. The dog had been through so much, and yet hadn't given up. Neither had Logan. Do you think he'll make it? Logan finally asked, his voice a little rougher than he'd intended. Claire paused for a moment, her hands stilling over the dog's wound. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she gave the dog one last reassuring touch before turning her gaze back to Logan. I don't know, she said softly, but I'm going to do everything I can to make sure he does. Logan nodded, feeling a swell of gratitude. He couldn't explain it, but something about Claire's words gave him hope. Andy wasn't just a victim anymore, he was a fighter, and together they were going to fight for him. The night stretched on, and Logan remained by Andy's side, watching over him as the dog's shallow breaths became more regular. By morning, the storm outside had subsided, but the quiet tension in the clinic remained. The night in Timber Falls seemed to stretch longer than usual. The wind had died down, but the quiet in the clinic felt unsettling. Logan sat in a worn chair beside Andy, who had finally settled into a deeper sleep. His breaths were still shallow but steady. Claire had stepped away to get some rest, leaving Logan to keep watch. It was in those quiet hours with the faint hum of the clinic's heater filling the background that Logan felt it. A creeping sense that something was off. It wasn't just the storm. There was a nagging feeling, a strange pull in his gut, like something was about to happen. His eyes kept flickering to the window, watching the snow settle quietly outside. As the night wore on, Logan's eyes grew heavy, but his mind wouldn't let him rest. He kept thinking about the black SUV, the one he'd seen earlier that night as he rushed to get Andy to safety. That brief exchange of glances between him and the driver had unsettled him in a way he couldn't shake. There was something too cold, too knowing in the man's stare. Logan tried to push it from his mind, but it lingered. He stood up, stretching his stiff limbs, and walked to the window. The clinic was quiet, the snow reflecting the dim light from the nearby street lamps. It was just another small, quiet town. But Logan knew better. This wasn't just about the storm or even about Andy anymore. Logan's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of tires crunching through the snow outside. He froze, his heart rate quickening. The noise was faint but unmistakable, the sound of a vehicle moving slowly up the road. Logan's breath caught as he peered through the blinds. There, creeping through the snow, was the same black SUV. It moved quietly, almost cautiously, making its way down the street towards the clinic. Logan's pulse quickened. He had to admit it. The presence of that vehicle stirred something in him. The appearance of the SUV felt like more than coincidence. It wasn't just passing by, it was like it was searching for something. Or someone. The vehicle stopped just short of the clinic. For a few moments, Logan watched through the window, barely daring to breathe. He saw the silhouette of a man in the driver's seat, motionless. Logan's instincts screamed at him to stay hidden, to be careful. But there was something drawing him out, a need to know what was going on. He couldn't just sit there. He quietly moved toward the door, slipping out into the cold, muffling his steps on the snow. His hand hovered over the gun at his side, but he kept it tucked in his holster for now. As he approached the street corner, the black SUV began to pull away, its headlights cutting through the snow and ice as it turned onto a side road. Logan remained still, watching it disappear into the night. His heart was racing, the adrenaline coursing through his veins. Something wasn't right. The appearance of the SUV, the cold gaze of the driver, it all felt too intentional, too calculated. Logan stood frozen in the snow for a long moment, trying to make sense of it all. The driver had known exactly where he'd been. And that wasn't just a random vehicle passing through a quiet town. It was someone who had a purpose, a mission, and Logan wasn't sure what part he or Andy played in it yet. The thought that the SUV's driver had been following them, watching them, sent a chill down Logan's spine. Was Andy's rescue a mistake? Or was there something much larger at play here? He turned back toward the clinic, determination building in his chest. The storm outside was quiet now, but Logan knew that this night had only been the beginning. Something was coming. And whatever it was, Logan needed to be ready. The following morning was cold, gray, and quiet. Typical for a mountain town in the dead of winter. Logan didn't have time for the usual routines. His mind was consumed with the mystery surrounding Andy and the black SUV that had been lurking around the clinic the night before. He had a feeling that this wasn't just a random act of cruelty. There was something much bigger at play. As soon as the sun began to rise, Logan set out to begin his investigation. His first stop was Dr. Claire Jennings's clinic. Logan had many questions and he needed answers. Claire had been quiet during the night, focusing entirely on Andy's recovery. She hadn't yet voiced her thoughts about the severity of the dog's injuries, but Logan was certain she knew more than she let on. He arrived at the clinic to find Claire already in the back room cleaning up after a long night of tending to animals. The sight of Andy now resting on a soft blanket on the examination table brought Logan a sense of relief. The German Shepherd's breathing was steady, his eyes more alert. The worst was over, but Logan knew that the answers to his questions still lay ahead. Claire looked up as Logan entered. "How's he doing today?" she asked softly, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Better?" Logan replied, his voice low. "But I need to know more about what happened to him. I've got a feeling this wasn't just some random act of cruelty." Claire sighed, wiping her hands on a towel as she joined him by the table. "You're right," she said, her voice tinged with concern. "I've been going over his injuries in my head all night. Some of them don't make sense. There are signs of multiple kinds of trauma. This isn't just about neglect. Whoever did this, they knew what they were doing." Logan leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. What kind of signs? Claire ran a hand over Andy's fur, carefully avoiding the healing wounds. The cuts on his side. They're not from an ordinary whip or a belt. These are precise, calculated wounds meant to cause pain without killing him right away. The rope burns around his body. They've been tied so tightly it's like someone was testing his endurance. Logan's gut tightened. Testing his endurance? Yes, Claire nodded. And there's more. I found something else when I was examining his leg. She pulled out a small metallic object from the nearby counter, holding it up to Logan. "This," she said, "was embedded under his skin. It's a chip, about the size of a coin, but I've never seen anything like it. It doesn't belong in a dog. It looks engineered." Logan's heart skipped a beat. "A chip? What does that mean?" Claire's eyes met his, her brow furrowing. "It's not just a tracking device, Logan. I think it's part of some kind of program, a training program. Whoever did this wasn't just abusing him. They were trying to control him. It's like they were testing how far he could go before breaking." Logan felt his blood run cold. The pieces were starting to come together. "Do you think this was some kind of military or research project?" Claire nodded slowly. "It's hard to say. But this chip is beyond what a regular vet would use. It's not even medical. This is something different." Logan clenched his fists, frustration bubbling up. "I have to find out who did this to him. Whoever's behind this, they need to be stopped before they hurt anyone else." Claire gave him a sympathetic look. "I know. I'll keep my eyes open for anything that could help us track down the origin of that chip. But Logan, you have to be careful. This is more dangerous than it looks." Logan stood up straight, determination setting into his features. "I know, but Andy deserves better than to be a part of whatever this is. He's not just an animal to be used. He's a survivor. And I'm going to make sure the people who did this pay for what they've done." Days passed, and with each passing hour, Andy's recovery brought a glimmer of hope. His breathing became steadier, his wounds slowly healed, and his eyes began to show that spark of life once more. But it wasn't just his physical healing that was remarkable. It was the way Andy responded to Logan. The bond between them was forming in the quiet moments, when Logan sat by his side, when he gently patted the dog's head, or when Andy, despite his pain, would nuzzle close to Logan for comfort. Andy's loyalty was already shining through in small but undeniable ways. Each time Logan entered the clinic, Andy's eyes would track him, and his tail, once motionless, would give the faintest wag. Even as the dog's physical strength returned, it was his emotional connection with Logan that spoke volumes. Logan had always known the power of loyalty. It was a trait he respected deeply in people and animals alike. But seeing it in Andy in such a vulnerable state made it all the more powerful. Logan found himself sitting next to Andy for hours, simply watching him, as the dog rested, occasionally offering a soft word of reassurance. It was during these moments that Logan realized how deeply this dog had touched his heart. He wasn't just a victim of cruelty, he was a symbol of survival. And now Andy had a new purpose. Logan wasn't just going to save him, he was going to give him a chance to live the life he deserved, one full of dignity, trust, and freedom from pain. As the days passed, the bond between Logan and Andy became unbreakable. The dog, though scarred, exhibited an unspoken trust, his eyes always following Logan with a quiet, steadfast devotion. Every time Logan approached, Andy would stretch out, showing his vulnerability, yet trusting completely that Logan would never leave him. Logan knew, as he watched Andy regain his strength, that there was no turning back. He could no longer simply be a police officer handling a routine case. He was now deeply involved in Andy's life, and Andy had become his responsibility. But Logan's commitment went beyond saving just one dog. He had seen the signs of something far darker. Whoever had tortured Andy was not just abusing one animal. This was part of a larger operation, one that used animals for unknown but clearly dangerous purposes. Logan knew that Andy was just one part of a much larger story, and he couldn't rest until he discovered the full extent of the cruelty that had been perpetrated on animals like him. Determined to find out who was behind the horrors Andy had endured, Logan began to dig deeper. He spent hours researching, making phone calls, and reaching out to anyone who might have information. His mind was consumed by the thought that there could be other animals out there suffering just like Andy had been. One evening, Logan sat in his small cabin, papers scattered across the table in front of him. His fingers ran over the chip Claire had found embedded in Andy's leg. The more he thought about it, the more he realized that this wasn't just about a dog. This was bigger, much bigger. He knew he couldn't do it alone. He needed Claire's help. She had the expertise, the knowledge of the animal's medical conditions, and most importantly, she cared deeply about them. If there were others out there, others who were trapped in the same hell Andy had been, he wasn't going to stand by and do nothing. "I'm going to find out who's behind this," Logan said to himself as he glanced at Andy, now lying at his feet, eyes closed in peaceful slumber. "And I'll make sure no one else suffers like you did." Logan's eyes flicked over the papers scattered across his cabin's table, his mind working in overdrive. The more he researched, the clearer it became. This was no isolated case. Andy was just one small piece in a much larger puzzle, one filled with shadows and cruelty. But every piece of evidence he uncovered only led to more questions, more dangers lurking in the unknown. He stared at the chip again, the one Claire had found embedded in Andy's leg. It wasn't just a tracking device, it was something more. Logan's instincts told him that whoever had done this wasn't just hurting animals for the sake of harm. This was deliberate, organized. And most chilling of all, it was far-reaching. Logan couldn't keep this investigation to himself any longer. He needed to bring Claire in fully. Her expertise would be invaluable if they were going to get to the bottom of this. That evening, Logan headed to the clinic, his thoughts heavy with what lay ahead. Claire was working late as usual, organizing files and reviewing her notes on Andy's recovery. She looked up as Logan entered, her tired eyes sharp with concern. "Any luck?" she asked, her voice soft but urgent. Logan sighed, his frustration growing. "I don't know. But something's not right. I keep thinking that Andy's just the tip of the iceberg. I need your help, Claire. We've got to figure out where this came from." Claire didn't hesitate. She had seen the signs in Andy's wounds, the strange markings and precise cuts. She knew this wasn't random cruelty. There was something much more calculated at play. "I'm with you," Claire said, standing up from her desk. "Let's go through everything again, see if we can find something we missed." Together, they dug through the records, Andy's medical history, and the strange chip they'd found. Claire's expertise allowed her to identify more details than Logan had caught on his own. They spent hours going through the clinic's inventory and old case files, piecing together whatever they could about animals with similar injuries. The more they uncovered, the more they realized that Andy wasn't the only one. "There's more," Claire said quietly, pulling out a file Logan hadn't noticed before. "Look at this. There have been other cases. Stray dogs with strange wounds, reports of missing pets, but nothing concrete." Logan took the file from her, flipping through the pages. The dogs in the photos all had similar injuries to Andy's: precision cuts, rope burns, and signs of prolonged abuse. But what stood out to Logan the most was the connection to a pattern. These animals weren't just left to die or abandoned. They were carefully managed, tested, pushed to their limits. "This is more than just abuse. This is a program," Logan said, his voice low, realization dawning on him. "Whoever is behind this isn't just hurting these dogs, they're using them." Claire nodded, her brow furrowed in thought. "It looks like they've been experimenting, maybe training them for something. And the chip, it's a part of that. Whoever's behind this is organized. This isn't some rogue operation." Logan felt a pit grow in his stomach. The implications of what they had just uncovered were staggering. "We're dealing with a network," he muttered, feeling the weight of the words. "And the people behind it, they're dangerous. We've got to stop them before they hurt anyone else." Claire's face hardened with resolve. "And we will. But we need more than just these files. We need proof, something that ties this to the people running the show." Logan stood up, his decision made. "I'm going after them, whoever they are. But we need to be careful. We're dealing with something bigger than we realized." As the evening wore on, Logan couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. It was subtle at first, a rustling sound outside, a shadow moving in the window. But Logan knew it was more than just his nerves. Whoever was behind the operation had likely noticed their investigation by now. The stakes were higher than ever. The night had fallen thick around Timber Falls, blanketing the town in silence. Logan's nerves were on edge as he sat in his truck outside the clinic, the lights dimming as the hours passed. It felt as if the air itself was waiting for something, waiting for a trigger to set it all in motion. The weight of what he and Claire had discovered hung over him, an oppressive pressure. He had to act. The more he thought about it, the more Logan realized that the network behind Andy's suffering wasn't just a few rogue criminals. It was a well-organized group with far-reaching power. And they were watching. Logan glanced back at Andy, resting quietly in the seat beside him. The dog had come a long way since his rescue. His once weak, pain-ridden body was stronger now, though his eyes still held a certain sadness, a quiet depth of trust that Logan couldn't ignore. There was a part of Logan that felt responsible for this dog now, and that part wouldn't let him walk away from the truth. Logan checked his phone one last time. No new messages, no new leads. But his gut told him that tonight something would happen. There was no more waiting. He opened the door of his truck and stepped into the cold. The night felt sharper than usual, as if the wind itself was trying to send him a warning. He made his way toward the alley behind the clinic where the shadows seemed deeper, the air colder. His instincts screamed that something was wrong. Suddenly a figure emerged from the darkness, moving too quickly, too silently. Logan's hand instinctively moved to his sidearm, his fingers grazing the cool metal of his holster. The figure stopped just short of him, their silhouette barely visible against the night. For a split second, Logan's heart skipped a beat. But then the figure spoke. "You're making a mistake." "Pierce," a voice said, low and cold. The man's face was hidden in shadow, but his tone was unmistakable. It was someone who knew exactly what Logan was doing and wasn't afraid to confront him. Logan didn't hesitate. "Who are you? What do you want?" His voice was steady, though his mind was racing. He couldn't afford to show weakness now. The man took a step forward, his form finally coming into the light, revealing a sharp face and cold eyes. "I think you know exactly who we are. You're sticking your nose in something you don't understand. That dog you're trying to save? He's just the beginning." Logan narrowed his eyes. "You're behind this, aren't you? The ones torturing the animals. You're the ones running this sick operation." The man smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant smile. It was the kind of smile that made Logan's blood run cold. "It's not personal, Pierce. It's business. You should have stayed out of it." Before Logan could respond, another figure emerged from the shadows, this one moving quickly. Logan instinctively raised his gun, but the figure lunged at him, knocking the weapon from his grip. A brief struggle ensued, the sound of boots crunching on the snow mixed with the sound of Logan's breath coming in sharp bursts. Then, without warning, the man who had spoken earlier drew a knife, the blade glinting in the dim light. Logan's heart raced as he sidestepped narrowly, avoiding the blade's deadly arc. He kicked out, knocking the attacker off balance, but the other man was already on the move. Logan had no choice but to fight back, his training kicking in as he dodged and countered. Just as Logan regained his footing, he heard a low growl from behind him. Andy. The German shepherd's head was raised, his eyes flashing with warning. With a growl that sent a chill down Logan's spine, Andy leaped forward, and his powerful body colliding with the man holding the knife. The man fell back with a startled scream, dropping the weapon as Andy's jaws clamped down on his arm, holding him in place. Logan quickly grabbed the knife, kicking it aside before turning to face the other man who was already backing away, fear creeping into his eyes. "This is your last warning," Logan said, his voice low and deadly. "You walk away now, or you won't walk again." The man hesitated, his eyes darting from Logan to Andy and then to the dark shadows around them. With one final venomous glare, he turned and ran, disappearing into the night. Logan stood breathing heavily, looking down at Andy. The dog's body was tense, his muscles still coiled with adrenaline, but there was no aggression left in his stance. He had done his job. He had saved Logan just as Logan had saved him. "Good boy, Logan," whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Andy's tail gave a faint wag in response, and Logan felt a surge of gratitude. The bond between them was becoming unbreakable. As the adrenaline began to fade, Logan realized how close he had come to disaster. He wasn't out of danger yet. The network behind this was far more dangerous than he'd ever imagined. But one thing was clear now: he wasn't going to stop. He couldn't. The tension from the confrontation slowly ebbed away, leaving Logan with a quiet but resolute determination. His heart was still pounding, his breath ragged from the close encounter, but as he looked down at Andy, his loyal companion who had just saved him, Logan knew he couldn't back down now. The darkness that loomed over Timber Falls was bigger than just one dog's suffering. It was a web of cruelty that spanned far beyond what he could have imagined. Logan glanced around, making sure the coast was clear before turning back to Andy, who was now panting but standing proudly at his side. The bond between them was growing stronger with every moment. In the past, Logan had often relied on his training, his sharp instincts, and his experience as an officer. But Andy had proven to him that there was more to this than just tactics. There was something deeper at play: trust, loyalty, and the unspoken understanding between a man and his dog. Logan leaned down to stroke Andy's head, feeling the warmth of the dog's fur under his hand. "You're something else, Andy," Logan murmured, his voice thick with emotion. The dog's eyes softened, his tail giving a small contented wag. It was then that Logan realized how much he had come to depend on Andy, not just for protection, but as a constant reminder of why he had to keep fighting. The dog's strength was now his own. As they began walking back toward his truck, Logan's thoughts turned inward. The night's events had brought back memories he had long buried. Memories of his childhood, his father, and the painful lessons he'd learned in the line of duty. He had always believed in justice, but that belief had been tested countless times. Logan had seen the worst humanity, had to offer the dark side of society, the violence, the corruption. But what he had encountered in the past few days went beyond any of it. Whoever was behind this, behind Andy's suffering, was operating on a level of malice he hadn't faced before. Logan's mind wandered back to a case from years ago, one that still haunted him. He'd been a rookie cop then, just starting out in the department. The case had involved a missing girl, a network of criminals involved in trafficking, and an elaborate scheme of deception. It had taken everything Logan had to bring those responsible to justice, and even then the case had never truly been closed. There were always whispers of deeper connections, more people involved. Connections that Logan had never been able to fully unravel. It was during that investigation that Logan had learned just how far some people were willing to go to protect their secrets. The more he thought about it, the more it became clear. The network behind Andy's torture wasn't just a small-time operation. It was connected to something far larger, something more organized. Whatever's happening here, it's not just about a few animals, Logan thought aloud, his voice low. It's a system, a network, and I'm going to find out who's behind it. Andy's soft whine snapped Logan out of his thoughts. He looked down to see the dog's eyes focused intently on him, as if urging him on. It was as though Andy knew exactly what was at stake. Logan gave a small nod, his resolve hardening once again. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy. It never was. But Logan had seen the darkness of the world. He had faced it before. And now, with Andy by his side, he would face it again, no matter the cost. Logan's investigation into the network that had abused Andy grew more troubling with every new piece of information he uncovered. His mind raced as he followed the trail of clues, piecing together a dark and disturbing puzzle. It became increasingly clear that the torture Andy had suffered wasn't a random act. It was part of something far more organized, far more dangerous. Logan sat in his small cabin staring at a map of the region spread out in front of him. The map was dotted with locations marked with red circles and connecting lines. These weren't just random spots, they were places tied to mysterious disappearances and animal cruelty cases. But what really sent a chill down his spine was the realization that these incidents were part of a much larger pattern. This wasn't just a few rogue individuals exploiting animals. This was a network, an international criminal organization operating in the shadows using advanced technology and covert tactics. As Logan sifted through the records, his eyes narrowed on a particular section of the files. It was a series of encrypted documents, most of which Logan couldn't open without the right software, but the names mentioned within them were familiar. Some were linked to a few of the most notorious underground operations across the country: illegal weapons trades, human trafficking, and now animal exploitation. The more Logan dug, the more he realized that whoever was behind this was using these animals as tools in their larger criminal schemes. The dogs weren't just being abused, they were being trained for something more sinister. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. They weren't just using animals for testing, they were using them to build an army. This was no ordinary criminal operation. The advanced chips embedded in the dogs, the precise training methods, the way everything seemed coordinated. It was all connected to a far-reaching plan, and Logan couldn't let it continue. Logan's thoughts were interrupted by a soft growl from Andy, who had been lying quietly by his side. The German Shepherd's amber eyes were focused on him, a low, steady whine escaping from his throat. Andy had sensed Logan's rising frustration, and as always, the dog was there, grounding him in the present. Logan reached down to scratch behind Andy's ears, taking comfort in the dog's steady presence. "You're right," Andy Logan muttered under his breath. "We can't stop now. They've been getting away with this for too long." His mind flashed back to the night he had rescued Andy. how the dog had been left to die in the snow bound to those iron stakes. Whoever was behind this had no mercy. Logan's resolve hardened. He wasn't going to let them get away with it. He was going to find out who they were, where they were hiding, and take them down before they could hurt anyone else. As he began to organize his findings, Logan realized he was in over his head. This wasn't just a small-town issue anymore. The people behind this were powerful, well-connected, and willing to go to any length to protect their secrets. But Logan had something they didn't: determination and the loyalty of a dog who had been through hell and come out stronger. Together, they were unstoppable. The map spread out before Logan was starting to make sense. The locations, the patterns. Everything pointed to one place, a remote warehouse on the outskirts of Timber Falls, hidden deep in the forest. It was the perfect place to conceal the truth, far from prying eyes. And from what Logan had gathered, it was more than just a storage facility. It was the heart of the operation. Logan and Andy drove quietly, the thick trees casting long shadows as they ventured deeper into the woods. The weather had cleared, but the chill in the air seemed to grow stronger the further they went. The roads grew narrower, winding through the trees until the old warehouse loomed ahead, its crumbling exterior hidden by overgrown ivy and darkness. Logan's grip tightened on the steering wheel as he slowed the truck to a stop, the engine idling as he surveyed the area. "Stay close," Andy Logan whispered, his voice barely audible over the hum of the truck. "We don't know what we're walking into." Andy, ever the faithful companion, gave a soft whine, his ears perked, his body tense. The dog was fully aware that something was about to happen, something big. Logan opened the door, slowly scanning the area around them. The wind was still the only sound, the rustling of leaves underfoot. They moved cautiously toward the entrance of the warehouse, Logan's hand resting lightly on his sidearm. The smell of rust and decay filled the air. As they crept through the broken fence, entering the large, dilapidated building. Inside, the darkness was overwhelming, the walls lined with old wooden crates and metal cages. But it was the cages that caught Logan's attention. They were too well organized, too methodical, as if they had been purposefully placed. As they ventured deeper into the warehouse, Logan's heart began to race. The faint sound of whimpering reached his ears. It wasn't just the wind. The sound was coming from the far end of the building behind a series of metal doors. Logan held up his hand, signaling Andy to stay close. He approached the door cautiously, his heart pounding in his chest. When he cracked it open, what he saw made his blood run cold. There, in a dimly lit room, were dozens of dogs. German shepherds, Malinois, and other breeds, all locked in cages, some standing still, others pacing restlessly. Their eyes, empty and lifeless, reflected the dim light in a way that made Logan's stomach churn. He stepped inside Andy by his side, and immediately the dogs reacted. Some barked, their voices hoarse and desperate, while others remained motionless, their heads lowered in defeat. They were broken, physically and mentally. It was clear that they had been through hell just like Andy. Logan moved toward the nearest cage, his fingers trembling as he reached for the lock. It was rusted old, but still strong. As he fumbled with the key, Andy stood guard, his body alert and tense. The dog's eyes never left the shadows, his growl low and menacing. Finally, the lock clicked, and the cage door swung open. The dog inside, a large, muscular German shepherd, stumbled out, its body weak, but its eyes sharp with the instinct of a fighter. Logan knelt down, placing a hand on the dog's head, and it nudged his palm gently. A flicker of recognition passed through its eyes, and Logan felt a pang of sorrow for what these animals had been through, but they weren't out of danger yet. As Logan continued to free the other dogs, a sudden sound stopped him in his tracks. Footsteps, heavy footsteps, the distinct sound of men approaching. Andy's growl grew louder, his body tensing, ready to protect. Logan stood up quickly, securing the last cage he had unlocked. They had to move, and fast. But before he could make it to the door, 3 men stepped into the room, armed and ready. Their eyes narrowed as they spotted Logan and Andy, a mix of surprise and anger flashing across their faces. "Get away from the dogs," one of the men barked, his hand reaching for a weapon. "You're in the wrong place." Logan didn't hesitate. He stepped forward, his voice steady, commanding, "I'm not leaving without them. This ends now." The men didn't seem to care about Logan's declaration. They were here to protect their operation. One of them raised his gun, aiming directly at Logan, but before he could fire, Andy lunged forward, tackling the man to the ground. The gunshot rang out the bullet, missing Logan by inches. Logan reacted immediately, drawing his own weapon and firing a warning shot. The men hesitated for a fraction of a second, just long enough for Logan to take control of the situation, but that hesitation was all Andy needed. The dog, fierce and protective, moved with lightning speed, knocking the second man to the ground, his teeth sinking into the man's arm. The third man, realizing the fight was lost, started to back away, but Logan wasn't about to let him get away. With a steady aim, he fired again, this time hitting the man in the leg. The man dropped to the ground with a cry, clutching his wound. Andy released the man beneath him, panting heavily, his fur slick with sweat. Logan approached cautiously, making sure the remaining threat was neutralized. The room fell silent, except for the soft whines of the liberated dogs. "We're leaving," Logan said firmly, his eyes scanning the room. "Now!" He grabbed Andy's collar and pulled him toward the exit. They had come for the truth, for justice, but there was no time to waste. The men were down, but the network was still out there, and Logan knew that this was just the beginning. Logan and Andy moved quickly, their steps quiet but deliberate, as they made their way out of the warehouse. The freed dogs in their cages let out soft whimpers, their eyes filled with both fear and hope. Logan knew they couldn't stay much longer. The operation they had just disrupted was bigger than either of them had expected, and he had no illusions about the kind of people he was up against. They were halfway to the exit when a sudden noise echoed through the shadows. The sound of footsteps. Fast, heavy. Logan's instincts kicked in, and he immediately shoved Andy behind him, raising his gun. He wasn't surprised when two more figures emerged from the darkness, their faces masked their movements, calculated and cold. The warehouse wasn't empty after all. The men guarding it had only been knocked out temporarily. This was just the beginning. "Back off," Logan barked, keeping his gun trained on the men. Andy growled at his side, his fur bristling, his body tense and ready for the next move. One of the men, a tall figure with a thick beard, didn't hesitate. He lunged forward, drawing a knife and swiping it through the air with expert precision. Logan sidestepped narrowly, avoiding the blade as it sliced through the space where he had just been standing. Andy didn't wait for instructions. He was already on the move, charging at the man with ferocity. The dog's attack was swift and powerful. Andy sank his teeth into the man's leg, causing the attacker to stumble backward, but the other man, smaller and quicker, rushed forward, swinging a metal pipe. He struck Andy across the side, sending the German Shepherd skidding to the floor with a painful yelp. Andy Logan shouted, his heart racing as he watched the dog struggle to regain his footing. The man with the pipe swung again, but Logan was faster. He fired a warning shot, forcing the man to pause, giving Logan just enough time to knock the pipe out of his hands with a swift kick. But it wasn't enough. The man with the knife lunged again, this time aiming for Logan. His heart pounded in his chest as he barely dodged the blade, the edge grazing his arm. The pain shot through him, but he didn't falter. He countered with a jab of his own, knocking the man to the ground. For a brief moment it seemed like the tide had turned in their favor, but then the bearded man, injured but furious, grabbed a nearby chair and swung it with brutal force. Logan raised his arm to shield himself, but the blow connected, sending him crashing to the ground with a grunt. Logan Andy's voice wasn't just a growl this time, it was full of raw fear. With a surge of strength, the German Shepherd leaped back into the fight, his body colliding with the attacker and knocking him to the ground once more. Andy's teeth flashed in the dim light as he bit down on the man's arm, holding him in place until Logan could regain his bearings. Logan stood, his body aching from the fight, but his focus sharp as ever. He moved quickly, pulling the gun from his holster and training it on the remaining threat. The men were defeated, but not without cost. Logan's arm throbbed where the knife had grazed him, and Andy's side was bleeding from the brutal strike with the pipe. They were both injured, but neither of them was ready to give up. "We need to go," Logan said through gritted teeth. His voice was low, filled with resolve. Andy let out a low whine, his body clearly exhausted, but he stood strong beside Logan, ready to follow him wherever he would go. Logan reached down, scratching behind Andy's ears. "Good boy," he muttered, the words of reassurance meaning more now than ever. Their bond had been tested in more ways than one, but they had survived. Together. Logan knew their path wasn't clear yet. These men, these threats were just a small piece of the larger picture. Whoever was behind this operation wasn't going to let them go so easily. The network was bigger and more dangerous than they could have imagined. And the truth of it all, whatever it was still hidden deep in the shadows. Logan's mind raced as he and Andy made their way out of the warehouse, the cold night air biting at their exposed skin. They had escaped, but just barely. The confrontation with the men guarding the facility had been more than he'd anticipated, and the weight of what they'd uncovered was heavier than ever. Logan's arm burned where the knife had grazed him, and Andy's side bled, though he was still moving, his loyalty and strength unwavering. As they trudged through the snow, Logan's thoughts turned dark. He had known from the start that there was something far more sinister behind the cruelty Andy had endured, but now the scope of it was becoming clearer. These men, these shadowy figures, weren't just abusing animals for sport. They were building something organized, systematic, and terrifying. The first clues had been the chip embedded in Andy's leg and the strange precision of the abuse. But as Logan looked deeper into the network of cruelty, a chilling truth began to form. This wasn't just an underground dogfighting ring or isolated animal testing. This was a complex international operation using cutting-edge technology to create an army of animals, dogs and possibly other creatures, trained to fight, to follow commands, to be weapons. The thought sent a chill through Logan's body. They weren't just exploiting these animals, they were conditioning them, building an army, using them for something much darker than he could have imagined. His pulse quickened as he realized how large and dangerous the organization was. It wasn't a rogue group. It was something on a scale he hadn't seen before. And now Logan and Andy had stumbled right into the heart of it. "They're using animals like soldiers," Logan muttered to himself, his words barely audible over the wind. He thought about the dogs he had freed, how they were locked in cages, their eyes vacant, their spirits broken. What kind of monsters could do this to innocent creatures, and worse, who could be using them to further some twisted, malicious cause? Logan felt a deep sense of urgency. He couldn't let this go on any longer. He had already seen the lengths to which these people would go to protect their operation. The men they had confronted were just the tip of the iceberg. The real masterminds were still out there, and Logan knew they were watching, waiting. It was no longer just about Andy. It was about exposing this network, shutting it down, and freeing the animals still trapped in their cruel, merciless grip. The thought of the technology, the chips, the mind control, was terrifying. These weren't just wild animals. These were tools controlled and trained for some greater purpose. Logan's chest tightened. This wasn't a simple rescue operation. This was war, and they were in the thick of it. As Logan and Andy neared the truck, his mind was consumed with a single thought: how far did this network reach? The answer, he realized, was bigger than he could ever imagine. Whoever was behind this, whoever had the power to turn animals into tools for violence, wasn't just dangerous. They were ruthless, and they weren't going to stop unless someone stopped them. Logan opened the truck door, the cold air rushing inside as he helped Andy into the back seat. "We'll find them," Logan promised the dog, his voice filled with resolve. "We'll make sure no one else gets hurt." Logan's grip on the steering wheel tightened as he drove through the dark, snow-covered roads. The icy wind seemed to cut right through the truck's thin walls, but it wasn't the cold that made him shiver. It was the weight of the situation pressing down on him. The deeper they dug, the more dangerous the truth became. He wasn't just protecting Andy anymore. He was up against a network of people who would stop at nothing to protect their operation. Andy, lying quietly in the back seat, seemed to sense Logan's tension. The dog's amber eyes met his in the rearview mirror, steady and loyal. Logan gave a small smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. He couldn't let Andy down. Not after everything they'd been through together. As they neared Timber Falls, Logan's phone buzzed with a text message. He checked it quickly, his heart rate picking up when he saw the sender, Claire. "Logan, I've been doing some digging into that, Chip. It's worse than we thought. I'm sending you something now. Please be careful. Logan's pulse raced as he pulled over to the side of the road, reaching for the phone. Claire's message was followed by an attachment, an encrypted file. He quickly opened it and felt his stomach drop as the information began to load. The chip embedded in Andy wasn't just a training device. It was linked to a far-reaching covert military contract. This was no longer just about animal cruelty. They were involved in something so much bigger. Logan slammed the phone down, his mind spinning. This was no longer an operation confined to the shadows of Timber Falls. This was a global enterprise. He knew that he was walking on a razor's edge now. One wrong move, and the consequences could be catastrophic. His thoughts were cut short by the unmistakable sound of tires screeching behind him. A dark SUV, its headlights blinding in the rear-view mirror, was closing in fast. Logan's instincts flared. Whoever was behind this wasn't just watching anymore. They were hunting. In a heartbeat, Logan's foot slammed on the gas pedal, sending the truck racing forward, but the SUV was relentless, tailing him with precision. His eyes darted from the rearview mirror to the road ahead. The snow was falling harder now, blurring the vision ahead, and the twists in the road made it harder to lose the tail. "Stay with me, Andy," Logan muttered, his heart racing. He had to protect the dog. They couldn't afford to be caught, not now. The SUV's headlights were getting closer, the roar of its engine louder. Logan swerved, trying to lose it on the narrow, icy roads, but the SUV matched every turn. The driver wasn't making it easy. In fact, it felt as though they were toying with him like predators playing with their prey before the final strike. Suddenly, the SUV shot ahead, cutting off Logan's path. He slammed on the brakes, but the truck skidded on the ice, barely missing the guardrail as it came to a halt. The SUV blocked his way and the doors opened before Logan could even react. 3 men stepped out, their faces hidden behind masks, weapons in hand. Logan's breath caught as they began to approach. He grabbed his gun, heart thudding in his chest, but before he could make a move, Andy was already out of the truck. The German Shepherd lunged toward the men, his growl a low warning. "Get back, Logan," one of the men shouted, raising a gun. The crack of a shot echoed in the air, but Andy was faster. With lightning speed, the dog barreled into the man, knocking him off balance. Logan reacted instinctively. He fired a shot, aiming at the man with the gun. The bullet hit him in the shoulder, sending him stumbling back. But there were still 2 more men, and they weren't about to back down. The man Andy had tackled was recovering, pulling a knife from his belt. Logan's mind was a blur as he watched the scene unfold. He had to act quickly. Another shot rang out as one of the men lunged for Logan, but Andy was right there defending him. The dog was injured, his side bleeding from the earlier attack, but he fought with everything he had. Logan fired another shot, hitting the second man in the leg, but the remaining attacker was too close. The man grabbed Logan by the collar, slamming him into the snow. The cold bit at his skin, but Logan didn't let go of his gun. With a final desperate move, Logan managed to break free and drive the barrel of his weapon into the man's side, pulling the trigger. The man fell, and the snow was once again silent except for the distant sound of the storm. Logan staggered to his feet, his head spinning, but Andy was already there, limping to his side. "Are you okay, boy?" Logan asked, his voice hoarse. Andy gave a faint whine in response, his tail weak but still wagging. Logan looked at the fallen men, his chest tight with anger. This wasn't just about stopping an operation anymore. This was personal. Logan stood there, chest heaving, his gun still clutched tightly in his hand. The cold snow beneath him was stained with blood, both his and his attackers. His body ached from the brutal confrontation, and his head throbbed where it had slammed into the icy ground. But it wasn't the pain that consumed him now. It was the cold realization of what was at stake. They had just barely survived the attack, and he knew this was only the beginning. Andy, though wounded, stayed by Logan's side, his protective stance unwavering. The dog had been through hell, yet his loyalty remained unbroken. Logan gently placed a hand on Andy's head, giving him a small but reassuring pat. "We're not done yet, boy. We're not done." The sound of heavy footsteps crunching through the snow broke the silence. Logan's eyes snapped toward the noise, his body stiffening. It wasn't the men he had just fought. No, these steps were deliberate, calculated. Someone else was coming. Through the haze of the storm, a sleek black SUV appeared on the horizon. It rolled slowly toward them, its headlights cutting through the snow and darkness. Logan's stomach tightened as he recognized the vehicle. It was the same one from before, the same one that had tailed him, the one he had seen earlier that night watching from a distance. This wasn't just coincidence. The SUV came to a stop and a tall, imposing figure stepped out. Logan's breath caught. He had seen that face before, cold, calculating, and full of malice. It was Victor Hale, the man behind everything, the leader of the operation, the mastermind who had orchestrated Andy's torture and countless other horrors. Logan had known this moment would come. He just hadn't expected it to hit so soon. Pierce. Victor's voice was smooth, almost mocking as he approached. You've really gone and done it now, haven't you? Logan's hand tightened around his gun, his pulse quickening. You're the one behind all this, Hale. I should have known. Victor's smile was cold, unamused. Behind it all, I'm just the man trying to protect my investments, Officer Pierce. You see, this isn't about cruelty or power. This is about control, and now you've become a problem I'll have to solve. Logan's jaw clenched. You think you can intimidate me into backing off? You think I'm going to let you get away with this? Victor didn't flinch. It's not about what you think, Pierce. It's about what's coming next. You've already poked the hornet's nest, and now the sting is coming for you. Logan could feel the weight of Victor's words sink in. He wasn't just dealing with some petty criminal. Victor was part of something much larger. An organization with resources, power, and a ruthlessness that went far beyond what Logan had encountered before. Victor's eyes flicked to Andy, who stood by Logan's side, his hackles raised, his teeth bared. Your little dog there, he's a symbol of your commitment. But I think you're starting to realize you're in over your head, aren't you? Logan didn't respond. He didn't need to. The resolve in his chest burned hotter now. This wasn't just about Andy anymore. It was about every animal caught in this nightmare, and it was about the people like Victor Hale who thought they could control others without consequence. Victor continued, his voice lowering. You have a choice, Pierce. Stop this now, and I'll forget you ever existed. Keep pushing, and you'll learn what happens when you mess with something bigger than yourself. Logan's grip on his gun tightened. This was no longer a simple investigation. This was a war, and he had no intention of backing down. I'm not backing down, Logan said, his voice steady, filled with purpose. Not now, not ever. Victor studied him for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then, with a cold, dismissive nod, he turned to leave. So be it, Officer Pierce. Just remember you were warned. As the SUV pulled away, Logan's heart pounded. He knew that Victor's threat wasn't an empty one. The organization was big, dangerous, and ruthless. But Logan couldn't let fear control him. Not now. Not when so many lives depended on him. He turned to Andy, who was still standing firm by his side. Let's finish this, Logan muttered. We're not stopping until they're all behind bars. The wind howled outside the small office in Timber Falls as Logan, Claire, and the FBI team huddled around a map spread across the table. The room was filled with the quiet buzz of determination as everyone understood the gravity of what was to come. They weren't just fighting for justice now. They were fighting for lives, human and animal alike. Logan's eyes flicked over the map, tracing the route that led to the warehouse they had discovered earlier, the place where the network had hidden its most dangerous secrets, the place where animals like Andy had been imprisoned, abused, and turned into tools of violence. They had to move quickly before the organization could erase any evidence or relocate their operations. We've gathered everything we can, Claire said, breaking the silence. She was the one who had pieced together the medical details, analyzing the injuries on the animals, and confirming Logan's worst fears. But we need to be ready for anything. Whoever's behind this is highly organized, and they're not going to give up without a fight. Logan nodded, his jaw tightening. He had seen what they were up against. The cruelty, the precision, the willingness to turn innocent lives into weapons. But he wasn't going to stop until it was all exposed. We go in fast and hard, he said, his voice steady. We take out the operatives at the warehouse and free every animal in there. No one gets left behind. The FBI agents nodded, their expressions grim. The plan was clear. There was no room for hesitation, no time for second guessing. They would move in during the dead of night while the warehouse was still operating under the radar. A quick strike overwhelming their enemies before they had a chance to retaliate. Logan and Andy would lead the charge. The dog's courage had proven invaluable time and time again, and now Logan knew they would rely on that same strength to take down the criminals hiding behind the shadows. Andy's going to be key to this, Claire said, glancing at the dog who sat patiently by Logan's side, his amber eyes focused and calm. He'll need to be the one to clear the way as always. Logan gave Andy a soft smile. The German Shepherd had become more than just a companion. He was a fighter. He had been through so much, and yet his loyalty had never wavered. The trust between Logan and Andy was unspoken but undeniable. Together, they were unstoppable. Are we ready? Logan asked, looking at the team. Every agent in the room met his gaze with quiet resolve. They had a clear goal, one they would achieve together. We're ready, one of the agents confirmed. We hit them tonight. Logan stood up straight, his mind racing with the weight of the task ahead. The network they were up against was powerful, and they were dealing with people who would stop at nothing to protect their operation. But Logan had something on his side, the truth. And with Andy beside him, he knew they had the courage to face whatever came next. We're not just doing this for us, Logan said, his voice low but firm. We're doing this for every dog still out there, for every animal that's been hurt, tortured, and used. We're ending this tonight. Claire walked over to Logan, placing a hand on his shoulder. And we're going to make sure they never get a chance to hurt anyone again. Logan nodded, a fire building within him. Let's do this. The night was thick with anticipation as Logan and the FBI team gathered their equipment, double-checking their weapons and ensuring the plan was set. The cold air felt like ice against the skin as they moved out toward the warehouse, the heart of the operation they had been investigating for weeks. The truck rumbled down the narrow, snow-covered road, headlights cutting through the dark, but Logan's focus was entirely on the mission ahead. As they neared the warehouse, Logan could feel his pulse quickening. The darkness surrounding the building felt suffocating. The quiet was eerie, but Logan knew the calm before the storm was only temporary. He wasn't just walking into a criminal hideout. He was walking into the lion's den. Remember the plan, Logan said, his voice steady but firm. We hit hard, we hit fast. We don't let anyone get away. The FBI agents nodded, their faces grim with the weight of what they were about to do. They knew the stakes. They were fighting for the innocent animals who had been locked away and tortured for too long. But even more than that, they were fighting to dismantle an operation that had its hands in far too many dark dealings. Logan wasn't about to let that continue. As Logan and Andy moved ahead, the team split into two groups surrounding the warehouse on all sides. They had prepared for everything, flashbangs, tactical gear, and precise strikes, but Logan's mind was focused on one thing: the animals inside. They approached the side entrance, the door slightly ajar. Logan pushed it open slowly, the hinges creaking under the pressure. The cold air smelled of rust, old wood, and something more sinister: the faint scent of animal sweat, blood, and fear. The warehouse was silent, save for the soft clink of metal, but Logan could feel the tension building. They were close. Inside, rows upon rows of cages stretched out in the dim light, each one filled with a dog. German shepherds, Malinois, and other breeds, muttering softly in confusion and fear. Their eyes were dull, their bodies thin, the terror and pain they had endured evident in their every movement. Logan's heart broke at the sight, but there was no time for hesitation. He knew what had to be done. Move in, he whispered, signaling the team forward. We rescue them all. With precision and expertise, the FBI team quickly began unlocking the cages, pulling back the steel bars, and releasing the terrified dogs. Andy, though exhausted from their previous fight, was still by Logan's side, his eyes scanning the room, alert and focused. The bond between Logan and the German Shepherd had only deepened in the chaos of the last few days. Together, they were unstoppable. As Logan freed the last cage, a sudden noise made his instincts flare. Footsteps, loud and fast coming from the far corner of the room. The sound of men approaching, weapons drawn. Logan's heart rate spiked, but his training kicked in. "Get down," he shouted, shoving Andy to the ground as bullets flew through the air, barely missing them. The battle was on. Logan ducked behind a stack of crates, pulling Andy close to shield him. "Stay low, Andy," Logan muttered, his breath shallow. But even as he spoke, the dog was already moving, his training and instincts taking over. The firefight erupted in full force, the sharp crack of gunfire reverberating in the enclosed space. Logan fired back his shots, precise, each one finding its mark. He moved with purpose, every step calculated, knowing the only way out was through. His mind was focused, but his eyes never left Andy. The dog was moving with him, his growls fierce and protective, driving back the attackers. Logan and Andy fought side by side, the intensity of the situation making everything else fade away. They were a team, a unit, and nothing was going to stop them now. When the final shot was fired and the last of the attackers fell, the room fell silent once more. The only sounds were the heavy breathing of Logan and Andy, the dogs whimpering softly in their cages, and the distant howl of the wind outside. Logan looked around, his heart pounding. The warehouse was littered with the aftermath of the battle. The men were down, but the mission wasn't over yet. They still had to get the animals out of here, and he knew that meant they had to move quickly. Andy stood beside him, his body covered in cuts and bruises, but his eyes filled with unwavering loyalty. Logan's grip on the gun tightened. They weren't done yet. The fight for justice wasn't over, and Logan knew they had to finish it. Logan's chest heaved as he surveyed the aftermath of the firefight. The warehouse was now a war zone. Broken crates, shattered glass, and the faint smell of gunpowder in the air. His heart was still racing, and his body ached from the fight, but he didn't have time to rest. There were still lives to save. His eyes locked on Andy, who was standing firm by his side, bloodied but unbroken. The German Shepherd had taken a few hits, but his eyes burned with the same unwavering loyalty and determination. "Good boy," Logan whispered under his breath, his voice thick with gratitude. Andy's tail wagged faintly, and for a moment Logan allowed himself to breathe, only for the stillness of the room to be shattered by a noise from the back of the warehouse. Footsteps, faint but growing louder. Logan's instincts flared. This wasn't over. It wasn't just the men they'd already fought. The real threat was still lurking, and he knew exactly who it was. "Get down," Logan barked, pushing Andy behind a stack of crates. His mind raced. Whoever was coming now, they were prepared. Logan's eyes darted around, calculating their options. The freed dogs were huddling in the corners, some barking nervously, others still dazed. They couldn't let any more of these criminals get away. From the shadows, a group of figures emerged, 3 men wearing tactical gear and holding automatic rifles. They moved with precision, the cold menace in their eyes unmistakable. These weren't just henchmen. They were something else, something more dangerous. Logan's heart sank. He had thought he was getting closer to the end of this nightmare, but he was only just beginning to scratch the surface. One of the men raised his rifle, aiming directly at Logan. The sound of the gun being cocked was deafening. But before the shot could be fired, Andy was already on the move. The dog leaped forward, charging at the man, with the rifle knocking him to the ground in a blur of fur and muscle. The man screamed as Andy's jaws sank into his arm, his body twisting under the dog's relentless attack. Logan reacted instantly, rolling to his feet and firing a quick shot, hitting the second man in the leg. The man dropped howling in pain, but the third man remained. He was moving toward Logan, his rifle raised, ready to finish what the others had started. Logan fired, again this time grazing the third man's shoulder, sending him stumbling back. But it wasn't enough to stop him. The man advanced with a deadly focus, not even flinching at the wound. Logan's gun clicked empty, the magazine spent. He reached for his backup, but the man was already too close. In that instant, Andy charged forward once more, his body a blur of power and speed. He lunged at the attacker, knocking him off balance. The man's rifle fell to the floor with a crash, but the struggle didn't end there. Andy and the man fought on the ground, each trying to gain the upper hand. Andy's growl echoed through the warehouse, a sound of pure determination. Logan scrambled to reload his weapon, but before he could aim, the man pulled a knife, slashing toward Andy. Logan's heart dropped into his stomach. Andy was too close, and the knife was dangerously close to landing a fatal blow. "No!" Logan shouted. Without thinking, he threw himself into the fray. His hand grabbed the nearest object, a metal rod, and with all his strength he swung it at the man, striking him in the side. The man yelped in pain, dropping the knife as he staggered back. Logan didn't hesitate. He used the opening to grab the man, subduing him with a quick, forceful hold until he was completely immobilized. Andy, breathing heavily and bleeding from a cut on his shoulder, stood tall beside him, victorious but exhausted. The battle was over. For now. Logan panted, his body trembling with the adrenaline that still coursed through him. He checked Andy's injuries quickly. The dog was hurt, but not fatally so. Still, it was too close for comfort. Logan leaned down to scratch Andy behind the ears, his voice soft with gratitude. "You saved my life again." Andy gave a low whine, his tail weakly wagging. Logan took a deep breath, knowing this was just the beginning. The fight wasn't over. These men were only the first wave. The true mastermind, Victor Hale, was still out there watching and waiting. The aftermath of the battle left Logan and Andy standing in the dimly lit warehouse, surrounded by the wreckage of the fight. The air was heavy with the smell of gunpowder and blood, and the quiet that followed felt surreal. Logan took a moment to steady his breath, his heart still racing from the chaos. Andy was beside him, visibly exhausted but still alert, his head turning from side to side as if sensing the lingering danger. But for now, the immediate threat was over. Logan pulled out his phone and dialed the number for the FBI. It was time to make their move. "Logan, are you okay?" Claire's voice came through the phone, laced with concern. "I'm fine," Logan said, his voice low but firm. "But we've got a bigger problem. These men are just the beginning. Victor Hale is the real target. We need to move quickly before he disappears." "I'll get the team ready," Claire replied. "Meet us at the base. We're coming for him." Minutes later, FBI agents swarmed the warehouse, securing the area and taking the men into custody. Logan didn't allow himself to feel relief yet. His mind was still on Victor, on the man who had orchestrated the abuse of countless innocent animals, turning them into weapons for his own twisted purposes. The FBI team worked with precision, cataloging evidence and collecting the dogs they had freed. But Logan's eyes were locked on one thing: the trail that led back to Victor. He wasn't just some petty criminal. He was the mastermind behind an international operation, and now the FBI had everything they needed to bring him down. By the time Logan arrived at the FBI headquarters, Claire was already waiting, standing beside a large map on the wall. It was a blueprint of the entire criminal network, connecting dots across states and countries. Logan's pulse quickened as he saw the extent of the operation. This was bigger than anything he'd imagined. The organization had connections everywhere, from technology experts to covert military contacts, and Victor Hale was at the center of it all. "This is it," Logan said, his voice sharp. "This is what we've been fighting for. The network ends here. We have to take Hale down before he can slip away." Claire nodded. "We're ready to move. We'll coordinate with all available agencies. This ends now." Logan took a deep breath. He wasn't sure if the plan would work, but he had come too far to back down now. With Claire, the FBI, and Andy at his side, they would finish what they had started. The truth would be exposed, and the dark empire built on cruelty and manipulation would finally come crashing down. Hours later, Logan stood outside an abandoned building, a tactical unit by his side. They had tracked Victor Hale to his last known location, a warehouse on the outskirts of the city. Logan could feel the tension in the air as they prepared for the final confrontation. "This is it, Andy," Logan whispered to his dog, who was already by his side, his ears perked and his body tense. The loyalty in Andy's eyes was undeniable. The dog had stood by him through everything, and now, together, they were going to take down the man responsible for so much pain. Logan glanced at Claire, who gave him a quick nod. "Let's do this." The team moved swiftly and silently through the shadows surrounding the building. Logan's pulse was steady, his focus sharper than ever. He could feel the weight of the moment. Everything they had fought for was about to be decided in the next few minutes. Victor Hale had built his empire on cruelty, but it would all end tonight. The cold air hung thick with anticipation as Logan, Claire, and the FBI team surrounded the warehouse, their steps muffled by the fresh blanket of snow. Logan's heart was steady, but his thoughts raced. This was it, the final moment. All their efforts, the hours of research, the narrow escapes, the battle scars, had led them here. Victor Hale, the man behind everything, was just steps away. Logan looked down at Andy, who was standing beside him, his body tense with readiness. The bond they shared had grown stronger with each challenge, each fight, each near-death encounter. There was no hesitation now. Andy had been there through it all, and Logan knew that together they would see this through. As they prepared for the final confrontation, Logan thought about everything they had been through, from the moment he found Andy wounded and abandoned to the struggles they faced together. Andy was no longer just a dog. He was a partner, a friend, and a symbol of the resilience Logan needed to keep going. The team moved into position with Claire at Logan's side. She gave him a reassuring look, her eyes filled with the same resolve. They were ready. There was no turning back. "Stay close, Andy." Logan whispered, his voice steady but filled with purpose. Andy looked up at him, his amber eyes filled with loyalty. The trust between them was now unshakable. Logan's pulse quickened as they entered the warehouse, moving silently and swiftly, every step calculated. The building was dark and empty save for the faint glow of distant lights at the far end. It was there, the nerve center of Victor Hale's operation. Logan could feel the weight of everything that had led them to this point. They reached the door to the central room where Hale's operation was hidden. The team was poised, ready to strike. Logan's hand tightened around his gun, but his eyes never left Andy. The dog's posture was perfect, alert, calm, and ready for anything. "Ready?" Logan whispered to Claire, his voice steady, though he could feel the gravity of the moment. Claire nodded, her own gun in hand. "Let's end this." With a swift motion, the FBI team breached the door. They stormed into the room, their presence overwhelming. At the center of it all stood Victor Hale, flanked by armed guards. Logan's eyes locked onto Hale's cold gaze. This was the man who had orchestrated everything. This was the end. "Victor Hale Lowe." Logan's voice rang out sharp and unwavering. "Your operation ends tonight." For a moment, Victor didn't move. His face, usually so composed now, showed the flicker of realization. He knew this was the end, but his smile returned cold and mocking. "You think you've won?" Victor sneered. "You've destroyed a small piece of it. But the bigger game is already in motion. You're too late, Pierce." Logan stepped forward, his jaw set. "The only thing left is for you to face justice." The FBI moved swiftly, taking Hale and his men into custody. It was over. The network, the cruelty, the manipulation, it was all coming to an end. As they arrested Victor, Logan's thoughts turned to Andy. The German shepherd had stood by his side through every step of this battle. This victory wasn't just Logan's, it was theirs. It was a testament to the bond they shared, to the courage they'd found in each other when everything seemed impossible. Logan approached Andy, who was standing proudly by his side, still alert, but now with the faintest wag of his tail. The dog had been through so much, yet he remained the embodiment of loyalty, courage, and resilience. "You did it, boy," Logan said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "We did it together." The drive back to Timber Falls was long, the snowflakes drifting lazily from the sky, coating the world in a quiet blanket of white. The air in the truck was still, save for the steady hum of the engine. Logan's hands gripped the wheel, his mind replaying the events of the past few days. The battles, the danger, the uncertainty. But as the familiar outlines of Timber Falls came into view, a sense of peace began to settle in his chest. The weight of everything they had fought for was lifting piece by piece. Andy, lying in the back seat, was still. The dog was tired, his body covered in cuts and bruises, the faint marks of the war they had waged together. Yet there was a calmness to him now, a quiet confidence that seemed to radiate from him. Despite everything he had been through, Andy remained loyal, steadfast. And Logan couldn't help but feel that this journey, this partnership, had been the turning point in both their lives. When they arrived in Timber Falls, Logan pulled the truck up to his cabin. The place looked almost peaceful, nestled in the snow-covered landscape. It was hard to believe that just days ago this town had been a quiet backdrop to a dark underworld of crime. Now the nightmare had ended. The network was dismantled, Victor Hale and his men behind bars. The dogs that had been saved from the warehouse were already in the hands of foster families or animal shelters, slowly starting the long process of healing. Logan stepped out of the truck, taking a deep breath of the crisp mountain air. Andy followed, limping slightly but still standing tall. Logan leaned down and gently patted his side. "You did good, boy," he said, his voice thick with emotion. They had both come through this battle alive, and they had done it together. But it was more than just surviving. It was about what they had accomplished and how far they had come. The snow crunched beneath Logan's boots as he made his way to the small hill behind his cabin, Andy by his side. They reached the top, and Logan paused, taking in the view. Timber Falls spread out below the quiet town, wrapped in a wintry embrace. The storm had passed, and the sun began to break through the clouds, casting soft rays across the landscape. Logan's mind drifted back to the beginning of their journey, when he had first found Andy in that blizzard, left to die, bound by cruelty. He had no idea that day would mark the start of something so much bigger, something that would change both of their lives. Together they had faced darkness, confronted a vicious criminal network, and saved countless innocent animals. And now, standing here on this quiet mountaintop, Logan realized how far they had come. The journey wasn't just about justice for Andy, it was about the bond they shared, a bond forged through every hardship, every fight. It was about the courage they had found in each other when everything seemed impossible. And it was about something even more powerful, the unwavering loyalty that had kept them going even when the odds were stacked against them. Logan looked down at Andy, who was now sitting calmly beside him, his eyes scanning the landscape. The dog's body was battered, but there was a strength in his gaze that spoke of resilience, a spirit that nothing could break. "We're not done yet, Andy," Logan murmured, his voice full of conviction. "There's always more to do, more to fight for. But we've earned this moment. We've earned our peace." Andy gave a soft whine, his tail wagging slightly as if in agreement. They had fought side by side, and in this moment, standing together at the top of the world, Logan knew that their bond was unbreakable. The future was uncertain, but Logan and Andy had faced the darkness and emerged victorious. They had made it through together. And no matter what came next, Logan knew that with Andy by his side, they could face anything. Logan and Andy had won this battle, but their journey was far from over. With a renewed sense of purpose and a bond stronger than ever, they were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Together, they had proven that courage and loyalty could conquer even the darkest of forces. And as the sun began to set over Timber Falls, Logan knew this was just the beginning of a new chapter in their lives. In the end, the story of Logan and Andy isn't just one of survival. It's a testament to the incredible bond between humans and animals and the unbreakable spirit of loyalty, courage, and love. The German Shepherd, often seen as a symbol of strength and intelligence, proved that these traits go beyond mere capability. Andy's unwavering loyalty and resilience in the face of unimaginable cruelty highlight the profound capacity animals have to love unconditionally and protect those they trust. Through this journey, we are reminded that the love we give to our pets, especially our loyal canine companions, has the power to transform both their lives and ours. It's not just about training or obedience, it's about the deep, intrinsic connection that forms when we choose to protect and care for them. The story also calls attention to the cruelty and exploitation many animals face, emphasizing the importance of standing up against abuse and advocating for those who cannot speak for themselves. As Logan and Andy's journey comes to a close, it's clear that the values of kindness, empathy, and determination are what carry us through the darkest of times. The bond they shared wasn't just about fighting for justice. It was about a shared commitment to doing what's right no matter the cost. Let us all remember that every act of compassion, every moment of care for our animals creates a ripple of positivity that can change the world. Like Logan and Andy, we too can be heroes for those who need us most, showing that love, loyalty, and bravery will always triumph over cruelty.